Hey everyone, Tactics here, and today we got a bit of a surprise with Blizzard releasing the first iteration of the 11.1 patch notes for the PTR. Just everything about the patch, basically, we now know, including things like tier bonuses, adjustments to Mythic Plus, bunch of other stuff, and I'm going to be going over all the big ticket items with you here in this video, so you don't need to read like 30 pages of Wowhead documents. I've done it all for you, so you can just sit back, relax, and take a bit of a listen. There is a ton of content here, and I'm not going to go super in depth into the things, but I will post links like the patch notes if you want to read like exactly all the class changes, exactly all the tier sets. I'll link those in the description below. Otherwise, let's get right into it, where of course there is going to be just a metric ton of class changes. There's a ton. Pretty much every single class in the game has changes to at least one of their specs, big and small. It varies. I think for the big ticket ones, the biggest changes are to a marksmanship hunter, holy priest, and I think resto druid. I think those are the three that got like the most changes. But like I said, there are tons of changes across the board to every single class, so make sure you check it out. I will do a little bit of focus here on tanks because I am Mr. Tank Man. So Vengeance is actually getting 2 seconds added to Demon Spike duration, and also Cycle of Binding is going to be giving 5 seconds of CDR specifically when you cast Sigil of Flame instead of 2 seconds on all sigils. So I actually kind of like these changes for Vengeance. That's pretty nice in terms of increasing Demon Spikes as well as Sigil of Flame uptime on mobs. Guardian Druids. The Druid talent tree, the general tree, is looking like it's getting a very significant rework, as you see all of these things here. And there was actually a little blurb about this. So this is the Blizzard blurb where they talk about how, there's nodes that don't benefit your current specialization. One of my biggest pet peeves here, how utility interrupts, or you don't really feel like you actually have the ability to get some things. You have so many, nodes that you kind of are forced to put points into. You have to travel so far to get things. You have to invest in things that you don't really use at all. And so this is all apparently being addressed. We don't know what the tree looks like yet, but looking at all these changes and hearing the talk they're talking about it, I am hoping I will finally need to stop yapping about the Druid General Tree and how bad it is. We will see, of course, but this does give me a bit of hope that they are getting it. So we'll have to wait and see. But Druids, tentatively, we are a little bit excited about the changes to the General Tree. In terms of Guardian-specific stuff, another thing to be excited about is this brand new talent here, Ursul's Warding. You gain magic damage reduction equal to 5 or 10% of your damage reduction from armor. So this is a nice little thing, giving you a little bit of magic DR when you have a bunch of armor, of course, meaning Iron Fur now does something kind of against magic damage. Now, the cap on damage reduction from armor, I believe, is 75%, which means that the cap on the magic damage you gain here is going to be 7.5%. So it's not like it's a huge DR number, but you do have to consider this is going to be stacking with things like Tooth and Claw, with your already existing DRs like Rage of the Sleeper, like Barkskin, with your health increases from things like Lunar Beam and Incarn. So it's better than nothing for sure. But, again, this is the first iteration. Maybe it catches a little bit of a buff because, again, caps out at 7.5%, could be a little better. Reinvigoration here has also been updated where it now also casts a rejuve and regrowth on you at 200% effectiveness. So again, this is a talent that kind of got nerfed too much and was, something you kind of just had through. So maybe giving some value to this and giving some synergy with rejuve and regrowth talents, I guess, from the general tree. So I guess that's something, but I don't know how good this is actually going to be. Verdant Hearts now baseline and just some random number of things. I do want to point this out. This line, I hope, is a mistake. It says Raise now replaces Maul. Now, we went over this in the first season of Dragonflight when they first introduced Raise and replaced Maul. If Raise is a capstone talent that does less single target damage than Maul, don't have it replace Maul. I don't understand why it would possibly replace Maul. Now, if it just also does the same single target damage that Maul does, then yeah, you can have it replace Maul. But I think this is a very, very bad change if this isn't a mistake. So please don't do that. In terms of other tank stuff, there honestly isn't a ton. Like I said, the pack leader is being reworked, and so is marksmanship. All this stuff here. Brewmaster, as always, was forgotten. Sorry, Brews. Prot Paladins had almost nothing. They have this little interesting change where Hammer of the Light now also does a Consecrate, I think. So that's a little quality of life boost there. But we don't really expect a lot of Prot Paladin changes since they got stuff already in this first season. And I believe the only other change, I think Warrior got a couple things where they changed some talents around in their general tree, not a lot, but a little bit. And they also are going by and taking another pass at their rage generation, thinking it's too high. So a little unfortunate there. But there's a bit of compensation with further reduced shield wall cooldown and upping the power of an individual ignore pain. Because again, Pro Warrior is quite spammy right now. You are ignore paining a lot as filler, so I guess they're just trying to rein that back a little bit. We'll see how this actually affects the feel of the spec, but this actually could be decently impactful. So that's the class stuff. Tier sets. Now, we got a bit of a surprise about tier sets here, where basically what they're saying is that everyone of the same role, so all DPS, all healers, and all tanks, you share a two-piece effectively. So here is a DPS example. Your damaging spells have a chance to hit a jackpot, causing an upheaval at 100% effectiveness that does not knock enemies up. Casting Breath of Aeons always hits a jackpot. So basically, every single DPS spec has a chance to hit a jackpot, causing some of their ability at some effectiveness. And then when you do your major CD, you always get this proc. So Elemental Shamans, for example, Fire Elemental, it'll give them Fire Elemental for 8 seconds, and when you cast Ascendance, you always get one. And that's going to be the thing for all DPS specs. For tank specs, it's Luck of the Draw, which is a proc of your major cooldown for 4 seconds, and then some flat damage. And then for healers, it's Insurance. And I can actually go look exactly what Insurance is. It's a hot for 15 seconds, and then it gets consumed if they drop below 40% off. So every one of the same role is sharing that two-piece, and then you have a four-piece that somewhat interacts with that two-piece, but is more specific to the spec. Now, I will say, coming from a tank perspective, because I think I've heard mixed things about DPS, some are good, some are bad. Coming from a tank perspective, I don't like the effect, and I don't like almost any of the interactions. And I think I tweeted about this actually a little bit, where it's like, for me, one of the big allures of tier bonuses within an expansion is the fact that they will change up your playstyle a little bit from expansion, or from patch to patch, sorry, within a single expansion. And I do understand how in first patches, like at the start of Dragonflight and start of War Within, they go a bit more simple, they go a bit more general with the tier bonuses, because we're just getting hero talents, we just got the new talent tree rework, right? And I understand why you would go a little bit simpler then. But then, you know, in the second patch, in the third patch, I expect something a little bit more involved. And at least for tanks, it was a total miss in my eyes. Because again, if you look at Luck of the Draw, which is everyone's two-piece, you have a chance to, this should be IBF, I assume, for Blood DK, but it's just a chance to get a big DR for 4 seconds, and your damage on increased by 15% for 8 seconds. So that's what the tank two-piece is for, like, everyone, except not everyone has a button like IBF, right? If you look at Demon Hunter, this is now Metamorphosis for 4 seconds. Guardian Survival Instincts, of course, that's the same. But the real one that gets shafted a bit, again, in my opinion, is Brewmaster, who is proccing their actually I must have passed it. Where is Brewmaster? Here it is. Who's proccing Fortifying Brew, right? Like if you side by side, right? If the goal of this is to make balancing these easier, and you side by side and you say, yeah, Demon Hunter, we're gonna give them 4 seconds of meta. Brewmasters, we're giving them 6 seconds of Fortifying Brew. In what universe is that balanced? You know what I mean? Like those are nowhere near the same thing. So even at this level of simplicity, which I don't really like, it's very, very general. It honestly, and I'm not one that says this very much, I'm a person that kind of avoids this. It feels a little lazy. Even at this level of simplicity, they're missing the tuning by a lot. Even though this gives 6 seconds versus 4 seconds, I feel like this is night and day. Fort Brew versus meta, right? And then again, you move on to the 4 pieces, where you're like, okay, maybe these 4 pieces are going to be a bit more involved. Maybe these are going to have a lot more interaction. We'll go through the 6 tanks. I'm not going to go through everything, but we'll go through the tank because, again, I'm a tank guy. For Blood DKs, well, the buff is active and it has a 2-second increased duration. Death Strike costs 2 less runic power and can strike up to 2 nearby allies. So AoE Death Strikes, not too bad, or cleaving Death Strikes, I guess. And if you're in single target, all you get is 2 less seconds of, or 2 less runic power on Death Strike and 2 more seconds of this damage buff. And that's all you get. It's very underwhelming in a raid scenario, for example, for a 4-piece for a tank spec, and also changes absolutely nothing about how you play the spec. There's no change between last patch and this patch. You do nothing I mean, if anything, the first patch, the first season was more impactful for Blood DK. Vengeance, probably the most impactful, strictly because this gives you metamorphosis, right? You get 4 seconds of meta. That would be very, very good, especially depending on how it interacts with Fellsguard. And then their 4-piece is the hunt has a high chance to refresh its cooldown when you gain luck of the draw. So I don't know what a high chance is. We love RNG on RNG, which is, again, something I didn't cover. This initial proc is already RNG. There's no deterministic way to proc this. And so you're just a tank. You randomly get a 50% DR for, the tank star and vengeance or whatever. It's just weird, right? Tanks don't want that. Tanks want something deterministic. This, at the very least, for tanks, I think needs to be changed to something that makes more sense for the tank role. Because 4 seconds randomly of a 50% DR, like if you're not taking the boss, for example, right? And you just get 4 seconds of survival instincts or IBF or whatever, like that's useless, right? It doesn't do anything at all. Guardian Druid, speaking of, their 4-piece is your next 10 Druid abilities cast another Druid ability at 125% effectiveness. So literally, you do nothing different. You are just doing an extra ability that does something. I don't know. I mean, I guess you're going to get more rage probably, but again, it's going to be RNG. Like your Mangle, maybe you just cast cat abilities, maybe you cast Boomkin abilities. Who knows how it actually works? But even then, at the best, it's like you get extra rage gen for 10 casts. Okay, it doesn't really affect how you play at all. Brewmaster, like I was showing you before, it's Fort Brew, so probably, I think, the weakest, but it's also the longest duration of that. And then their next 2 casts of Blackout Kick deal bonus damage and 2 seconds reduce cooldown. Again, you don't. Is this really going to change how you play the spec? I don't really think so at all, right? Prot Paladin. Well, you have this buff. Shield of the Righteous refunds somewhere between 1 and 3 holy power and extends the duration of Luck of the Draw by half a second up to 10 seconds. So they get the longest duration, right? Theirs is going to be 20 seconds long. And I guess maybe this is the quote unquote most impactful rotationally because you'll be spamming Shield of Righteous significantly more whenever you actually get these procs, I guess. But realistically, I mean, Shield of the Righteous is kind of off the GCD, right? So all this is going to do is bump up the APM of the spec a little bit, and you're really rotationally going to be doing almost the same thing, just pressing your Shield of the Righteous button a little bit more while also doing other stuff, right? Then we just have the Last Warrior, which was previewed in their little video, where Shield Slam's chance of crit is increased by 50%, and its critical strikes reduce the cooldown of shield charge specifically by 6 seconds during this 10-second buff. So, maybe you can get this down, 12, 18 seconds, maybe if you're really, really lucky, 24 seconds down, which would be quite a bit of CDR. But again, it's just, I don't know, it's RNG dependent. It's not super impactful in my opinion. This is probably not going to be super consistent either. I don't know. I'm underwhelmed by the tank ones at the very least. I'm not going to speak on the DPS. I'm not going to speak on the healers, but by the tank ones, I'm very underwhelmed and honestly kind of disappointed that, again, the whole your 2-piece is all an RNG defensive. I hate that. I really hate that. Moving on though, we're done with that. Catalyst charges are going to be working a bit differently. And by catalyst, sorry, I mean the KSM, AOTC, and 1600 rating reward. It used to give a token, and now it says each of the feats of strength for achieving Keystone Master 1600 and killing the final raid boss now grants 1 additional catalyst charge. Now it's not super clear, but what Wowhead is, taking as their perspective, and what I think also potentially, is that now each single one of these will give you an additional catalyst charge, so you can get 3 additional catalyst charges, 1 each time you complete this. Now, maybe this is wrong. Maybe this is still, you only ever get 1 catalyst charge from this, in which case it's probably a slight downgrade because you also need to have an item available to catalyst. But if this does actually work in the way Wowhead and I think it does, where each thing will give you a catalyst charge, that means if you do a bunch of different variety of content, you can get multiple catalyst charges within the first couple weeks of the patch, which will drastically help people to get tier. And then it's, a relatively low price to pay to have to actually find pieces to catalyze, in my opinion. So if it works that way, I think this is probably a good thing. You can go PvP to 1600, which, is not too bad. If you're getting AOTC early, you're doing Mythic Plus, you can get 2 tokens relatively quickly, right? So all that is pretty nice for getting your tier bonuses early on in patch. Big thing here. Title, DINARS Return. So basically, in the raid, they are going to be implementing a raid Renown track, which goes all the way up to, I believe, 20. And you're going to be getting a ton of things in this Renown track. So you can see here, it kind of lists the main things, which is you're getting different buffs to your thing, kind of like the threads buff in Norbar Palace at these levels here. So you're getting 6 total stacks of this. I believe it's a 2% or it's a 3% buff. 6 total stacks with a 3% buff here. There is the chance to get some augment runes, and that chance I think becomes guaranteed later on in the track. So some free augment runes weekly once you get in the track. The raid skip is attached to this. A raid portal is attached to this as well, and 2 DINARS are attached to this. So once you get deeper in the track, you'll be able to buy loot from the raid specifically that you want, which, you know, again, players have been asking for this. It's going to take you some time to get there. We don't know exactly how you're going to be getting this renown, how long it's going to take to get this renown up. I assume it's going to be related to the raid itself, right? Killing the bosses probably gives you some amount of rep. Maybe it scales with difficulty. But again, it's nice. You're going to be able to get deterministic loot. You've been unlucky in the vault. You've been unlucky in the actual raid in terms of drops for weeks and weeks and weeks. You're going to be able to buy those before the end of the season, which is super, super nice. Again, in terms of eye level, it does appear that the Dinar items will go all the way up to the new myth track cap, which is going to be 678 in the next patch. Don't worry, it's not going to be like it's lower eye level or anything like that. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be very happy for something like this. Now, maybe something similar for Mythic Plus, maybe, who knows? Who knows? Speaking of Mythic Plus, we do actually have some news. I didn't open this page for some reason. There we go. There's some new. This isn't actually the post. It's fine. So there's some very, very new big news. So there's a new account-wide achievement called the Keystone Legend, which is at 2850 rating. Once you achieve this ranking, failing to clear a Mythic Plus dungeon within the timer no longer reduces the level of your keystone on keys that are below level 12. So basically, if you're doing any key between a 2 and an 11, and you already have this achievement, you can deplete your key. Say it's a 10 key. You depleted it. Guess what? It's still a 10 key. This is absolutely amazing, I think, for the general pug community of the game. You know, obviously you do have this kind of gating it. You do need to get to 2850 first. Maybe this is just how things should work in general for keys below 12, because that's kind of the below pushing range. But, you know, I think this is definitely a great start here to have this achievement available and just give people, you know, something to push towards. And then, you know, when they're playing alts, when they're playing, you know, without their friends, they're pugging, they have a little bit more breathing room and they're more willing to pug those keys below level 12 because they're not worried about their key getting chain depleted down to like a 6, right? That's awesome. Really, really awesome. This also removes the vault decay below 12 as well, which is nice, but you can still lower the key if you do want to, of course. They're also adjusting the affixes, so they're basically making the buffs to the enemies, if you don't do the affixes, uniform. So they're all going to be doing the same thing every week, whether it's instead of buffing haste, buffing damage, and reducing damage taken, they're all going to do a slight bit of damage increase to the mobs and a bit more damage reduction, again, depending on how much you fail the affix by. They're also introducing a new affix as well as redesigning a couple ones. So Pulsar, so while in combat, Zaltan's going to summon Pulsars that orbit players, and this is going to replace the Oblivion affix, which for those that don't know, those are the crystals that kind of slowly move in and you can soak them. So that one is going to be gone. Guile, that's the plus 12 affix, that's getting redesigned. So now keystones above level 12 increase health and damage of enemies by 12% per level instead of 10% per level. I do wonder where this kicks in. I hope this starts to kick in at 12, right? So that, you know, 1 to 11 is 10% per level, and then at 12, you know, the first 11 steps are 10% per level, and then each step thereafter is 12. That's how I assume it does work, which means that there isn't going to be this crazy big initial jump, I think, at key level 12. It's at the very least going to be significantly better than it is now in the season. So we'll take that. I haven't actually done the math behind this, but at the very least, I think it does kind of eliminate the significant jump you see happening at the 12 key level and instead makes it a bit more gradual, which is good. Again, I am team take away the damage scaling at 12 and make it health scaling, but potentially this is also a solution that could work. And, you know, again, the big thing is to, I think, take away that massive jump at 12. The, the break in, linear kind of difficulty progression there. Removing that, I think, is big, while still, signifying, hey, this is the push key level. So this potentially does address that. We'll have to wait and see how it actually works out in terms of the scaling. Voidbound, which is the guy, I think, the guy that spawns. It's now a 15-second cast time, and he only grants it when the cast completes. So he doesn't grant it occasionally throughout it, which is nice. This was probably the most annoying one because he would just instantly start stacking up that DR. So that's nice. Now it's going to give damage reduction based on the shield percentage left. So that's how that would work. So good changes, I think, overall to Mythic Plus. Not perfect, not everything I wanted, but I think these are all movements in the correct direction, and I don't have any complaints with any of these individual things being added to the game. So that's a win in my book. That's a win. Let me know how you guys feel. Let me know what else you guys want to see from Mythic Plus in terms of changes moving into next season. Then we have some smaller things. So Gilded Crests, apparently you're going to be potentially able to get them from Delves. We don't know exactly how Delver's Bounty or Delver's Gilded stashes work, but apparently both these things will drop Gildeds. I assume they're not going to be like infinitely farmable or super common or something like that, but we don't know. But there is some way to get them from Delves, so a little bit more progression from Delves, which is nice, but I assume it's just going to be way more efficient to do Mythic Keys, especially with the Crest changes and Mythic Raid, of course. Augmentation Evokers can no longer buff healers and tanks. This is a massive, massive change. And one of the big reasons Augmentation's kind of been able to hold on for their spot for so long is this, right? You make your healer better at healing. You make your tank better at tanking. This is gone. They're now basically fully a DPS spec. You will bring them on the merits of your DPS in a 5-man environment. They were compensation buffed, of course, because you're not buffing healers and tanks, so they're going to be buffing the 2 other DPS available a little bit better. Maybe 3 other DPS if you drop a healer and put in a 4th DPS. Smile. But yeah, I think this is generally a good change. Tanks and healers kind of across the board don't want to be propped up by an Augmentation Evoker. Does this mean you may need to buff tanks and healers across the board? Maybe. I don't think any of them would complain at that. But yeah, I mean, I do think this is positive for the health of the game in terms of 5-man compositions, in terms of augmentation compared to other DPS specs, and in terms of tanks and healers having the power in their own kit rather than being amplified by someone else. So happy to see that. Speaking of tanks, Threat's been buffed. Woo! This is also live. This is the only change also now live on live servers. Threat has been buffed by 22%. I was going to scream about Threat in my next video coming out probably on the weekend at some point now that this is going to be coming out. But yeah, Threat, hopefully this does a lot to help the Threat issue, because Threat is a bit silly right now. And I'm sure that's only going to get worse as seasons go on, because generally DPS scale better than tanks in terms of damage output. So it's only going to get worse. And finally, we do have a change that a lot of people, myself included, thought would be really, really cool when they added the Warband campfire screens. There's going to be more of them. You're going to be able to earn more of these campfire, screens where you can put all your characters on. Just a cool additional customization that you can get. Again, these are, I think, thematic to the current expansion. I assume they will just continue adding them, and they're, based on like achievements and stuff like that. So it's cool. It's just a cool little additional cosmetic in the game. And that is my definitely short, only 20-ish minute roundup for you guys. This is, again, the big points. There's a lot of detail. I'll post these links to like the tier sets and the class changes all in the description below if you want to check those out. Let me know what you're looking forward to the most down in the comments below. Are you excited? How do you feel about these tier set bonus? How was your specific specs tier set bonus? Because maybe some of these are actually really, really good. Again, wasn't super impressed by the tank ones, but let me know what the DPS and healer ones are. As always, thank you so much to my Patreon supporters for helping me to continue to create all this content absolutely free for you guys. You all are the best. And I hope everyone has a fantastic holiday season, and I'll see you all in the next one.